Welcome to Crypto in America Live, the only show bringing you candid conversations on the biggest news stories, legal issues, and policy developments shaping the crypto world every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. It's me and you today, Gerald.
Yeah, we'll hold it down. Happy Friday. Interesting week.
Interesting week, a long week. I think yesterday we said happy Friday without realizing that it was actually Thursday.
Yeah, it's like great job, guys.
Yeah.
We can all go home now. And it's like, nope, one more to round out the week. Yeah.
I know I ask this every week, where are you in the world today?
Where am I in the world? I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, for the weekend, and we'll be going to Churchill Downs later today. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Very nice. I'm back in New Jersey for the week and hopefully the month. I know I say this every time I end up back here, but I think I'll be here for a little bit now. Hopefully no more travel, but we will see.
Yeah.
We'll see. So a little bit of an overview for what we'll be bringing you guys in the show today. We did an interview at SmartCon, Chainlink SmartCon conference this week with Ben Jones, the founder of the Ethereum Layer 2 blockchain Optimism, where we discussed L2's place as L1s continue to scale and compete for users and adoption. Later on in the show, we'll bring in Aave Labs General Counsel Lee Schneider to discuss market structure and when we might see it get done, and how the SEC and the CFTC can accomplish quite a lot through rulemaking in the interim. But first, we're going to get to the week's top stories. Let's talk about the market. Gerald, I mean, let's see where we are now. We've come up a little bit since we saw Bitcoin crash down to 99,000 earlier in the week. I think there was some apprehension around that, not maybe so much from crypto natives. I feel like, this is kind of part of the game when you've been in crypto for as long as most people that we know have. But a lot of TradFi people were texting me being like, what is going on with Bitcoin and why does my portfolio look like crap?
Yeah, I love it. It's like the James Franco like hangman meme, like first time. Ever seen that?
First time.
Yeah. Like it's I mean, look, we've been here. I think crypto, it's just a really volatile asset. And yeah, we had a good conversation with a future guest that we'll air later about this yesterday, just in terms of the deviation between sort of how crypto is reacting to this and how TradFi is reacting to this. I think it's just two totally different kind of audiences. But yeah, at the end of the day, look, our industry loves leverage and we love futures, and sometimes things don't go very well. So yeah, I think still okay to be bullish, but obviously just a lot of kind of cascading effects from liquidations. A couple Fridays ago, there's 19 billion, wiped off the market cap in a day. And yeah, you kind of see this play its way through the system.
Yeah, I love the stat. It's not really a stat, but kind of the reality that in the traditional stock market, a 20% drop is a bear market, right? And in a healthy bull market cycle, or just a healthy cycle in crypto, you can see swings of between 20 and 40%. And that's considered pretty normal. So you compare the two. I remember talking about this with my former Fox Business boss. He's like, Bitcoin's down 20%, like bear market. What does that mean? And I'm like, no, like that's kind of normal. And everyone's like, oh, that is? I'm like, yeah, apparently.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is just, it comes down to how small the market is, how nascent all this is, right? You start talking about like crypto having a $3 trillion market cap, but Vanguard itself manages like 9 trillion in assets.
Right.
And so when you have a bunch of sellers in a larger market, hopefully there will be buyers to absorb those changes in price. But with a smaller market, volatility can just really run its way through a system.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see what next week brings. Maybe the sentiment will rise a little bit. Let's get to number 2 headline. Animoca Brands is making a move to go public on NASDAQ through a reverse merger with Singapore-based Currency Group. And that's currency without the Y, currency, because I was reading my newsletter back today and I thought I misspelled it, but it didn't. Ticker symbol CURR. The company says the deal will create the world's first publicly listed diversified digital assets conglomerate. That means NASDAQ investors could get direct exposure to the trillion-dollar altcoin economy in a single investment. We had Yatsu on the podcast a couple months ago. I believe it was June. They have a lot of different kind of hands in different pots, I feel like, in Animoca, right? They've got AI, NFTs, gaming, DeSci. What is DeSci again, Gerald?
Decentralized science.
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel like you can put D in front of like anything now, right? And kind of make
Yeah,
it
it's just decentralized.
decentralized. Yeah.
Decentralized kitchens.
Look at that horrible RBF I have in that photo. It's terrible.
This is early. It's crazy that we've only been doing this since like April. That feels like forever ago.
I know.
Yeah.
I know, it really does.
But yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, Animoca has been doing this conglomerate thing for a while. Like they had a bunch of projects that did very well in like 21, 22, kind of like Sandbox. They made some big bets on like the metaverse, and they've had a lot of gaming. I think Yat, when he was on the show, so they have something like 400 portfolio companies.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting to see that kind of exposure for that kind of a company come to NASDAQ, because I have a feeling investors are going to have to figure out how to deal with like a business like that. It's, it's a lot of different things going on under the hood. So exciting to see that. Should be cool.
And everyone's choosing NASDAQ. Can we talk about that? I know we had Kevin Kennedy on last week or the week before on Crypto in America, but a lot of these companies seem to be leaning towards NASDAQ as opposed to the New York Stock Exchange. I wonder if we'll see any more companies go towards NYSE.
Yeah, no, I think it's a size and like a technology focused thing. NASDAQ has historically been the place where technology companies IPO.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think it's actually kind of interesting. A lot of traditional investors compare crypto overall as essentially like NASDAQ beta, meaning just exposure to like as NASDAQ goes, crypto sort of tends to go. They're pretty heavily correlated. And so maybe we'll just have them combined. We'll just have all of the crypto companies just list on NASDAQ, and then you're good to go. We've completed the cycle.
Yeah, there you go. The self-fulfilling prophecy, as it were.
Yeah.
Well, it was kind of crypto week, right? You remember there was actually a crypto week in Congress, but we're kind of calling this the unofficial crypto week because it just felt like it for us. There was so many big announcements. We were at Ripple Swell earlier in the week where we sat down with Brad Garlinghouse, the Ripple CEO, and I think got our most views ever on a single episode for Crypto in America, right? And
the army is strong.
The army is strong. The XRP army is certainly strong. I thought it was a really interesting interview. Brad got into a few topics, more than a few topics, but really dug into kind of what Ripple is, the long-term vision, right? Because for so long, they were sort of known as the company that was sued by the SEC, sort of the first big company to be sued by the SEC. And they really became known as the company that took on the SEC in the courts and sort of won in a sense, right? And now they're rolling out all these announcements between acquisitions. This one was probably the biggest one of the week, right? The $500 million strategic investment by Fortress and Citadel, one of the most, well-known hedge funds in America.
Some big scary names to traditional crypto folks in
totally.
In that round. Yeah.
And launching Ripple Prime on Monday, their brokerage firm. I just feel like this company is kind of just knocking everything out of the park right now. So it was definitely an interesting interview for us and an interesting conference for us to attend. And then we were at SmartCon as well, where we were on stage with Stani, the founder of Aave Labs.
Yep.
And what did we talk about with him? Quite a few things, mostly, the direction of DeFi, what's happening in that space, Ethereum, the launch of the Ethereum advocacy group that is going to be doing a little bit more advocacy work on the Hill, to kind of push the things that Ethereum core developers care about. Because there hasn't really been, you see, there's obviously Solana Policy Institute,
Yep.
a sponsor of our show, by the way, and but not much work in the sort of Ethereum circles that you see, being talked about much in policy circles in Washington, right?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. So first of all, excited to collect from Brad when Duke beats Kansas.
Oh, there you go. Yes, that was
in a couple of weeks. Excited for that one. And it was, 2025 is the year of the suits, right? And so with Stani and with all the events we were at this week, I think we were just commenting on, if you go to like Digital Asset Summit, you go to DAS in New York or something, you're like, all right, this is like a suits conference, right? This is a TradFi sort of event. You go to like ETH Denver, or you go to something historically, in the crypto space, like NFT NYC or something. You see a lot more hoodies, but it was definitely suit heavy. Yeah. And I think as far as advocacy goes, there's things that the Ethereum community has supported, like DeFi Education Fund, for example, has a sort of its roots, with Uniswap and some of those protocols. But the Ethereum Foundation, I think, has been very quiet. So it's interesting to see them kind of step in directly and see the importance of getting it right, particularly with all which we're going to talk to Lee about probably later in a bit, but like with all the concerns around not only the securities issues, but also just like privacy, some of the developer protections that we're seeing really come into focus. It's good to see everybody coming to DC.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of privacy, something we talked about before we went live, Zcash.
Yeah. It's when we were checking the price feeds there to see how Bitcoin was doing. I had not realized because I know there's a few folks that are part of the Zcash community in DC. So I've been hearing about it forever. Knew it was doing well. I think it's up like 323% this month.
Wow.
I might have that number wrong, but it is like way up. And it's interesting that when you combine it with these things like developer protections, sort of like the reemergence of privacy as an important topic in crypto, it's gone on a ride. Yeah, it's crazy.
Really interesting. All right. Well, let's do the last news topic before we get into our interview with Ben. That's the American Bankers Association and other banking groups. They're really ramping up their attacks on stablecoin yield. They're writing to the Treasury Department this week. In a letter, they urged it to uphold the Genius Act's ban on stablecoin interest. Now, this has been something that we've been talking about on the show quite a bit, this fight between the banks and the crypto industry over this yield battle, right? Obviously it's banned in the Genius Act, but there's this potential, not workaround, but this potential like notion that they may be able to change some of this in the Clarity Act. And it's getting kind of nasty as it comes down to the sort of the final hour with some of this implementation with the Genius Act and also with Clarity, right? Do I have that right, Gerald?
Yeah, no, I think this is a topic that people have basically been struggling with since the passage of Genius, which, obviously is a law in the books. And so now people are kind of coming at it from other angles, trying to establish. I think that the challenge to me with the idea that, first of all, we have to like define stablecoin, right? Which is part of what Genius did. And, okay, so this is how it's going to be backed. It's going to be backed by T-bills, money market funds. It's going to be auditable, fully collateralized. So it's like, okay, we know what stablecoins are, but everyone in finance has to figure out how to pass incentives and rewards and benefits onto their users, right? And so this to me is a big sort of realization by the banks that commercial deposits are actually terrible for like when you talk about incentives and rewards, for the folks that use them. I mean, it's been kind of a monopoly on, the money system, the lending system for a while. And to see this kind of innovation, be questioned or prevented just because they don't want to have to give you 4%, on your account is disappointing. And some of the arguments they're making seem like things that they should have considered when they were being asked about the drafts of the bill. I think that's another thing that a lot of folks in DC like to point out is they were part of the process, lockstep. Like all the big banks, they were there. It's not like they were surprised by this. And so it's kind of really disheartening to see this level of a pushback and fight after this is already done. Like it seems like sort of hopefully too little too late, but we'll see how it shapes out.
So why weren't they more vocal on this at the time? Is it just something that they missed?
I'm sure we should definitely ask Lee about that. I'm sure there are people much, more informed than me on the topic. My kind of theory is maybe they've just been playing this game a lot longer than we have as an industry. And they recognized that they were going to have an opportunity to kind of switch things around and, let the industry get the win and then also start adopting the technology. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like we're talking about the year of the suits, right? Like stable coins are one of the only products that really has product market fit in crypto. Traditional finance realizes that. And so I think it's probably some combination of just waiting and seeing what they could do with rulemaking and other avenues, and then just the momentum behind that legislation. I think people forget how crazy the actual crypto week was in DC, where that vote failed, right? And then it came back, and then it was, what are we going to do? And we got Genius passing a law, but yeah, it's been a wild ride for stablecoins so far.
Yeah, about to get wilder. Yeah. Well, I think we may have some comments. Okay, Kentucky here. I've never been to Kentucky. All right, Northwest Washington in the house. Washington. Now, this might be a silly question. Is that Washington D.C. or is that Washington State?
I'm gonna guess by that profile picture that it is Washington State.
Yeah,
and I respect it. Yeah, but
I've only been to Seattle, Washington. That's not really like Eleanor. Hey.
Yeah, that's the fan club.
All right. Thank you guys. No, we appreciate all of you guys tuning in as always. So we are going to get to Ben. We did share a little bit before that we were at Chainlink's SmartCon conference, and we sat down with Ben Jones from Optimism to talk about the future of Ethereum in the US, Layer 2 scaling, and what his team is building with the Optimism superchain. So we'll roll that tape.
Today's guest is Ben Jones, the co-founder of Optimism. We are recording on the ground at SmartCon with Ben, so give us a little bit of grace. It's probably noisy, but noise is good sometimes, all right? You guys need a little bit of energy, right? So Ben, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, y'all. Yep, we'll shout over the background noise, and
you'll make up for it.
You got to be thankful that these days suits and crypto is a very good thing, and there's a lot of folks around, so that's very exciting.
So true. We always like to ask our guests, what does crypto in America mean to you?
Freedom, sovereignty, the future.
I hear that, yeah.
I mean, look, I'm one of the founders of a project called Optimism. Fundamentally, we're an infrastructure provider. So maybe a different meme than you maybe normally get as a response that I'll give you is it's about building low-risk internet platforms. That is kind of the key. One, if you don't mind my language here, what we've seen, just forget about the finance industry, across technology broadly, is enshittification. We see lots of software platforms that start off really good, and then they become extractive, they become bad, they become compromised. So to me, crypto in America means crypto globally, which means making software platforms where you can't be evil. That's maybe one of the classic memes. It's about building software platforms that will stand the test of time and will not turn into being run into the ground by some particular stakeholder.
Yeah, so we were interviewing Stani from Aave earlier today, and Eleanor brought up that Ethereum has launched a new initiative in the US going after policy. The Ethereum Foundation itself, and I know you guys aren't the Ethereum Foundation, but Ethereum itself has been very limited in terms of engaging with policy and opportunities in the US. I know we were talking a bit before about sort of the huge shift that's happened. What do you think the opportunities are for kind of Ethereum in the US that's untapped, and especially talking about some of these institutional, the suits are here, and then on the policy side as well?
Yeah, so I think, fundamentally, we're an infrastructure provider, and so we sit in a very interesting vantage point in this, where we're trying to figure out what our partners need from compliance and making sure that on the software side, we can serve them. And one of the implications of this, or one of the learnings that we've had, is that this is not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. And depending on what people are talking about bringing on-chain, looks very different between a game, between a real-world asset, between a stablecoin, and some new kind of bespoke market that you're trying to create. So, to me, fundamentally, what are the opportunities? It really depends on the sector, and what's exciting and tantalizing, and also something you should be skeptical of, is that there's a lot of opportunities all over the place, which is a whole lot of nothing in some ways, and it's everything in other ways. To narrow in on the opportunities, I think there's kind of different parts of the stack where we see people have different requirements. Observability and insight and data analytics is one of these areas where I think there's just leveling up that we can do as an industry to understand who are the customers playing on the field of these blockchains, and where are they coming from and what are they doing. In other areas, it's about ordering and sequencing. So it's about how do we construct blocks in a way that makes sense and is well fit to an application and does a good job of serving what we need on the policy side as well. So that's not to say we're providing any one particular solution. You need the right building blocks, and those are some of the building blocks.
We talked before you came on, and you said that you just gave a talk on the same stage that we did with our chat with Aave before. Aave, I just said Aave, oh my god.
Aave.
Aave.
Same
Stani
letters.
from Aave. I've been doing that all day. And you talked about, kind of what I talked about on a panel the other day about the race to modernize finance, right? But you talked about, there's a lot of opportunity out there, but there's also a lot of risk. From your vantage point at Optimism, Ethereum Layer 2 blockchain, what are the risks that I guess like our audience should be kind of thinking about or aware of, that you're seeing in the market right now?
Yeah. So from my vantage point, one of the things that I've seen is multiple cycles of institutional blockchain, the enterprise blockchain is here. And in past cycles, that really hasn't panned out. So I think you need to take a very skeptical eye. And the biggest risk is just that these things go nowhere. Obviously, I think the writing's on the wall here. I'm not claiming that these things are going to go nowhere. I do think that we maybe are not taking a critical enough eye to what is going to work and what is going to run into the same issues that previous generations ran into. And honestly, I think it's kind of ironic because I'm sitting here saying I'm an infrastructure provider, but the worst thing that you can do, and I think one of the biggest risks, is to over-focus on the infrastructure. There's kind of a meme in crypto that like the anti-crypto people say, oh, blockchains are just a database. That's all it is a database. And I think it's easy for us in the industry that we know that there's sovereignty and freedom buried somewhere in there. We think that it's easy to kind of turn our nose at that and say, oh, it's not just a database. But if you use the system in the wrong way, it kind of is just a database. And so this is what we saw in a lot of prior generations of trying to bring blockchains into the enterprise realm, is you take something that's a really good server that was running well, you turn that into a blockchain server, and then you kind of are left scratching your head going, now what? What do I do next? And if you don't have an answer to what comes next, if you're not thinking long term, I think the risk is you spend a bunch of investment transitioning an infrastructure without having an unlock that comes on that new infrastructure.
When it comes to kind of implementing this infrastructure stateside, how do you kind of see Ethereum's usage going beyond just like speculative trading and different maybe applications on that front and into other use cases? Is there certain market behavior that you're tracking in the US?
I think that the biggest insight, one of the biggest data points by far that we're seeing that has come out in the last year that is a really big deal is the decorrelation between stablecoins and spot trading in crypto. One of the reasons I've been kind of dubious about stablecoins, or one of the skeptical lenses that you could have cast over stablecoins in previous cycles, is that stablecoins are having all of this usage. What is that usage? Oh, well, it's actually just you dump your speculative crypto asset into the usage. And so, unsurprisingly, these were very, very, very highly correlated. Every time that crypto spot trading goes up, stablecoin transactions go up. When those go down, they go down. And we've seen that for years. 2025 is the first year where we have had a dramatic, unquestionable divergence and decorrelation between these two things. And what that means is that people are finding value in stables that is not just the other side of the crypto speculative bet. So to me, that's the most exciting metric. Obviously, a lot of that usage may be in crossing borders, right? The fact that we have predatory fees when you want to move money across borders is a huge problem in traditional finance. And stablecoins are an opportunity to go and solve that. And so I don't think that's the only use case, but certainly that's an example of decorrelating crypto as a speculative asset from crypto as a valuable use case. And stablecoins always sounded like that, but I think now we actually have the proof that they are providing that real impact in practice.
Yeah, I'm curious. I want to ask about, you said you guys have been in this space for years. Optimism is an L2, and there was a debate, I think, sort of talking about decorrelation. There's this sort of rise of L2s, and you saw a ton of volume there. You guys obviously have made it through. You've been successful, but now it's all the world needs is one more L1. Come on, bro, just one more L1. Say is an L1 or parallel EVM. I'm curious, when you're talking to institutions, my first question is do they care? And then the second one is, how do you position yourself with the tech stack that you're bringing to the table versus all the other sort of entrants that you've seen kind of come in?
Yeah. So, okay, I first have to correct you briefly. Optimism is not an L2, it's a super chain of L2s. It's a network of L2s.
Thank you for the correction.
So we're powering Base
Yeah.
and Sony and Uniswap and World and many others.
Yeah.
And I think the way to tie that back into the rest of the question is to say we started off just building one chain. Like Optimism is an L2 was the story many, many years ago, like in the kind of like COVID era. And we learned a lot. One of the things that we learned is that you really want to focus on modularity of code. So we made a lot of early mistakes writing kind of these monolithic code bases that were serving some purpose that we had in sight. And when we turned the corner and saw the next thing that we wanted to go pursue, the next opportunity, it was going to be hard to get there. And so when we really went after the OP stack in earnest, and we said, now is the moment for us to start selling this into big institutions and to encouraging other people to use our software to deploy chains, a lot of that was correlated with us having confidence in the flexibility and reliability of the software to meet customers where they are. All that being said, no, I don't think they care. I don't think we are at the part of the cycle and the part of the evolution of crypto where the institutions have a deep understanding of something like the differences between an L1 and an L2. Forget the data availability model underlying that L2. Forget the parallelism of the threads underneath. Forget any of that. Really what they're trying to wrap their brain around is what is block space. And I think to be a good partner, you need to give block space that is flexible enough to meet their needs. But most of that is about explaining what block space is and that it can meet their needs and working with that partner to figure out how.
But I think in terms of like the super chain you brought up, there's Coinbase's Base, there's Kraken's Ink, there's Uniswap's Unichain, there's World Chain, which is derived from Sam Altman's crypto project. So when you talk to these people in DC, they probably understand that a lot better. They're like, oh, this chain is associated to something, right? Or like even with Optimism's OP mainnet, this is associated to the infrastructure provider, right? So how does that kind of like shape the discussions there, or maybe like make it more understandable than like this weird technical jargon?
I think it's fair to say.
Or does it not?
It's helpful. It's helpful to be
sure.
I would much rather be having conversations like this.
Context cues,
I would much rather be having conversations with chains that can be associated with projects than chains that cannot be associated with projects.
Weird abstraction,
Yeah, there's no question that that's helpful. But I think if you dig under the hood, it's like, what even is a chain doesn't get solved by saying this company has this chain and this company has this chain and this company has this. Like,
well, I thought it was helpful.
It helps out the boundary, but it doesn't get at the like, what is the difference between a completely centralized chain that is literally a server and the other end of the spectrum of a Bitcoin that's fully permissionless, decentralized, etc.
They're like, you're what's under all those lapel pins that come seeing us, bothering us all the time. It's like the Bitcoin-based lapel pins.
Right. You can collect all the lapel pins you want, but you got to understand how the pieces fit together.
I know you've described like chains as the new smart contracts in the context of these Ethereum L2s. How does that kind of like inform the U.S. growth strategy for Ethereum adoption, like for both developer and then user-facing ideas?
I got to give you another contrarian answer here, Jackie. I think that...
That's okay. Fight me.
Yeah, exactly. Bring it on. So chains of the new smart contracts is a message that is very useful for Optimism to deliver to the technical players that are going to be thinking through making chains or thinking through the technical basics of how they're moving on chain. In terms of public consumption, exactly. In terms of public consumption, be that to industry players, be that to people on the Hill, be that to just the average user, we need to get away from all of this language. And we need to just, like, nobody thinks about the website backend that they're interacting with. They think about websites. And even the disambiguation of chains and smart contracts, at the end of the day, is not that useful. Applications are things that are on chain. Sometimes there's a smart contract on one chain, sometimes the smart contract's on a standalone chain. At the end of the day, these are just implementation details. We shouldn't be talking about that to the people that's not going to resonate with.
Yeah, Gerald mentioned in the beginning the launch of this new Ethereum advocacy group on the Hill. Are there any sort of policy initiatives or anything that you'd like to see kind of come out of what's going on in Washington with the market structure bill, or I guess not genius implementation, but mainly clarity, that you think would accelerate Ethereum adoption or like help any of these sort of initiatives that the new advocacy group is trying to get done?
I mean, just get it shipped. Just get it shipped. I think.
Get it done.
Yeah. I don't know. We're in a state of affairs where like there's different drafts and different causes and all these things, and so like I don't want to speculate too much. And again, I'm an infrastructure provider. I'm not a compliant provider. I don't have the deepest answers here that I could possibly give you. What I think, so I do think it's fair to say that at some level of granularity, these technical specifics that Jackie was talking about will indeed matter, and we need to make sure that there is an understanding of that, and we need to make sure that we don't end up in a world where there are a bunch of words about what you should do that are very, very, very difficult to translate into actions that you can take on chain, products that you can build on chain, or infrastructure that you can deploy on chain. So I do think it's fair to say at some level of granularity, what I would like is for these things to make sense in the realities of the technological infrastructure that we have existing. All of the bits and edges and fuzzy details on that, I'm not the man to answer.
Yeah, let me, I guess, ask you this, and we were talking a bit before we started recording, so I won't get you in trouble, but the notion that you guys have been around since COVID, you've seen some regime change, you've seen different environments to build in. Without like getting into the specifics of how it's impacted by the SEC or some of these regulators, do you feel like in the current environment you have more creative space, like as a builder, to try things out, to build cool things? Like, what do you think? Because I've talked before about explaining to people what an L1 is not. Right? We're not a wallet, we're not a custodian, we're not an exchange. Do you feel like there's more room to kind of try things out, or is it you just got to get clarity shift and then you'll feel much more confident in building like in the US?
Gerald's trying to get me in trouble here. I'm an infrastructure provider. I'm not a compliance provider.
Very well worded as a lawyer. The other way around though.
I think if we look at what's going on in the industry broadly, the answer has to be that people are more comfortable, right? Because it feels like every week now that an exciting new announcement is being made. Those aren't all going to pan out. Those aren't all going to, in 1 year, turn into the next revolutionary product. But they are definitely there. They definitely exist. And the fact that people are announcing them is clearly a sign that they're willing to go and experiment and do more. So, is the job done? No, absolutely not. At the same time, I think it's undeniable that the signals that people are providing with their actions in terms of how they're thinking about launching products, these announcements, shipping things, means that it must be a better environment.
For what it's worth, I think your legal team will love that answer.
Okay.
Ben, we're here at SmartCon. Obviously, I have to ask you, from your time here today, what's been your biggest takeaway or the best thing you've learned today while you've been here?
I mean, it's all about community and discussion, and I kind of joked at the beginning about there's a bunch of, behind the scenes, there's a bunch of suits off in the distance over here. And the suits can do good things now, I think is my number one takeaway. There was an era where going to a crypto conference and meeting some suits was a recipe for a boring conversation or an educational, a one-way education that was valuable, but it wasn't a two-way exchange, and it wasn't real discussion about how we're going to build the future of finance and bring new tools on-chain. So my biggest takeaway is that there are people here now that are from big institutions that we can go and talk to and have a two-way conversation, not just a one-way conversation. Does it mean that they know exactly what a blockchain is in a way that, Ben of 7 years ago wouldn't have scoffed his nose at a little bit from an engineering perspective? Absolutely not. Does it mean that they have the rough shape and are able to drive a conversation forward, and I can ask questions about what it means for them to move on chain and get an answer that makes sense to me and might be useful to me in determining what Optimism's product should be? Yes, we are at that point. So I guess that's summed up in a word is like maturity. It's like the space is maturing to a point where these conversations can go both ways.
Love that.
Ben, aside from everything we've discussed, what is something that you're paying attention to that you think others should as well?
Oh man, are you trying to? I'm getting in trouble with my lawyers and leaking all my alpha. Oh my goodness. I think ironically, we've talked a big talk, and I think we've made huge strides in terms of user experience, especially in the Ethereum community. I mean, in the past year, we had account abstraction ship. I don't want to get into a bunch of weeds on the tech, but basically something that allows us to put a layer of abstraction between on-chain actions being taken by wallets and the user interfaces that we display to our users. that is a big change. I think that's unlocked a lot of folks that can actually like not take a massive user experience hit by moving products on chain. At the same time, I don't think we've grappled with the universality of those components nearly enough. So I think that there's a really exciting next wave of innovation that's going to happen that abstracts away not only what it means to be transacting within one blockchain ecosystem, but allows you to transact in a way that transcends any one blockchain. And maybe that's a boring answer. It's just like wallet UX is going to keep getting better. But I feel like we have an opportunity to get a little lazy now that the wallet UX has gotten passable. And I think that the next level of this is to make it freaking excellent.
I love his energy. He has the best energy.
Yeah, that was such a fun conversation. And I think, like, speaking of, you're the suits and his observations from like an engineering, he's like truly, I feel like if you made like a technical founder in a lab, you would get Ben. And that was a really fun conversation, and going to be fun to segue back here to the land of the suits or the not suits with our next guest here.
Yes, our next guest is Aave Labs General Counsel Lee Schneider, who's been actively in contact with regulators across the globe, including the SEC, and we're going to get into all those things. But to be honest, I don't think I've ever seen Lee wearing a suit, except for maybe when we had dinner in London at the Aave Labs conference that we were all at back in May, which feels like an awfully long time ago, does it not?
I was not wearing a suit that night. The only time I've worn a suit recently was when I went to the Genius Act signing ceremony at the White House. And I got a lot of I got a lot of grief from people because I also had a tie on, because I had to run out and buy a tie because I don't have any ties anymore. But thankfully, the Senate side gift shop had a wonderful tie, salmon colored, I'm told. So I look very dashing. At least that's what Hester Peirce said. So, what can I say?
Yeah, so that's what it takes to get Lee Schneider in a suit now, huh? You got to
invite me to the White House. I'll wear a suit.
White House, anything else? Lee, when did you decide that you were just too cool of a crypto lawyer to have to wear suits anymore? How did that happen?
I decided that actually a little bit before I became a crypto lawyer, because I was doing a lot of fintech work more generally, and I was going around seeing clients, and there were a lot of people in jeans and t-shirts and flip-flops and shorts, and I kind of decided at that point I'm not loving wearing a suit all the time, and so I kind of gave it up for the most part. So it's been a good 12 or 14 years now since I sort of gave up suits mostly.
We joked yesterday. We had Hunter Horsley from Bitwise on the podcast, who that episode's going to be coming out relatively soon. But we were joking how, he has meetings quite frequently with wealth advisors. And, he says, I feel like I have to show up to these meetings in suits and ties. And he's like, I do. And it's just, I don't wear suits and ties anymore. He's like, I showed up to something with Morgan Stanley the other day. He's like, didn't have a tie on. He's like, I fit right in. He's like, people just aren't wearing them anymore.
Yeah. Except at blockchain conferences now, people are starting to wear suits again. Like lawyers I've known in the blockchain space for 8, 10, 12 years are starting to wear suits to the conferences. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Stop.
Yeah, well, I can tell you where they still definitely wear suits is DC. And Lee, you've been doing a lot of God's work down there. How has it been going? Like, what do you think about where we are with market structure? I know we're going to dig into all of it, but just tell us a bit about, what took you down there and what kind of impact do you think you guys and we as an industry are having on the Hill right now?
Yeah, sure. So I've been going to Capitol Hill for quite some time now, 8, 9 years. Even back when I was general counsel at Block One, when I first went in-house, we recognized the importance of doing education in Washington, D.C., and particularly on Capitol Hill and at some of the regulators. Obviously, at the SEC and the CFTC, they've had some very sophisticated people on the staff for quite some time, but it never hurts to talk to the commissioners and make sure they understand the tech, but it was especially important on Capitol Hill to do the education. So I've been running around Capitol Hill for quite some time now, and it's been mostly on an educational mission until recently. Obviously, with Genius Act this year and the market structure stuff this year, I've been much more focused on the actual language of legislation, trying to make sure that we get the legislation to reflect reality, but also trying to make sure that the legislation provides a smooth glide path to good market structure for the United States. And I think that's the key issue right now between the Clarity Act from the House and then what's being negotiated in the Senate.
Yeah, Lee, you've been talking to the SEC crypto task force about how tokens function a lot and how they fit into blockchain networks and why that matters for regulators and how they should be thinking about this as they converse with Congress and vice versa. But I'm curious to know, like, how do you explain to regulators the difference between a token that's, integral to a network and one that might be considered a security? Because for so long we were told that everything under the sun was a security, right, by Gary Gensler, and now that's changing, and there's actually like token classification that's going on, and there's rules for this stuff now that's being laid out. So kind of how are you going about, I could talk about education, right? How are you going about educating and kind of laying out and having these conversations with regulators and policymakers in DC?
And Ellie, I think the sun actually is a security under the Gensler regime. So just so you know. But
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I've been banging on about token classification for quite some time right now, because frankly, one of the things that really attracted me to blockchain technology was this ability to tokenize any asset, to digitally represent assets in a digitally unique form, right? That's really cool technology. That is one of the hard problems in computer science that's solved by blockchains. And so to me, that's always been sort of the holy grail. This is what we are all shooting for. Now, Ellie, you said the tokens that are integral to the network or protocol. That's exactly the focus that we've had as one of our classification areas. We call them protocol tokens now, right? That's a token that's integral to the functioning of a protocol. And that's, we see as sort of the key to unlocking really good, workable market structure legislation. We can differentiate those tokens because of the fact that they're integral to the network from tokenized assets. So tokenized securities and other financial instruments, tokenized event tickets and other cool uses for NFT technology, tokenized loyalty points or frequent flyer miles, tokenized digital art, and right. So there's all of these different things that are getting tokenized over the course of time. And that's something that we in the Avalanche ecosystem focus on very heavily because of the way the Avalanche technology works. So this is exactly what I've been explaining to people. Look, when you think about a digital representation of an asset or a bundle of rights, that's what tokenization is all about. It's no different than writing something on a piece of paper, recording it on an Excel spreadsheet database, or some other kind of centralized database, except it's decentralized. And that presents all kinds of new possibilities, that opens up the world to participate, as opposed to just little corners that then have to figure out how they interoperate with the other little corners, et cetera, et cetera. So, from our perspective, this is super important stuff, and it's super interesting stuff, and it's the wave of the future.
Lee, I'm curious. So we as lawyers obviously love the technology, but we also love defining things. We love our definitions. And you just mentioned several of the ways you guys are categorizing these tokens. I know much more recently, because you guys have been making this argument for years, but Miles Jennings put out the Andreessen sort of taxonomy that I think was like pretty heavily aligned just philosophically with what you guys were putting together. When you're talking to other attorneys, and as we go from the House to the Senate, and now we start this ancillary assets definition discussion, how hard is it to just agree within the legal community on some of those definitions? And I've been part of some of those discussions. I know they're people are very passionate, and then to take that definition to a member of Congress and get them on board with what you're talking about. Like, what is that process like?
Yeah, I mean, look, you and I've had some really good conversations about it ourselves, often with a cocktail in our hands, which has been good. But I think that's the whole point, is we've got to keep having these conversations, because different lawyers sort of look at it from different vantage points. So I think you're broadly right that the A16Z classification system and ours are are sort of aligned at a high level. But one of the cool things about their classification system is they dug in a little bit more on protocol tokens and native DLT tokens and sort of tried to get some different groupings within that broader category, which is not something that we've spent a huge amount of time doing. And I think some of the work that they did there was really good. There's also some stuff that I disagree with, and Miles and I have vigorous conversations about this stuff all the time. So it's having those conversations. It's getting a bunch of lawyers who are really knowledgeable and sophisticated about the law here that I think is really important. I was at SmartCon this week. I was on a really good panel, and one of the points that we kept making on that panel is, if it's going to be SEC jurisdiction, it's got to be a security. You can't just sort of ram all tokens into SEC jurisdiction if they're not securities. And that's super important to keep saying over and over and over again, because people get a mindset of, well, it trades like the stocks trade. It is, electronically and with algorithms and smart contracts and stuff like that. Well, it must be a stock if it trades that way. And that's sort of like a default setting in a lot of people's heads, when of course FX trades that way and lots of other types of assets trade that way. I mean, for crying out loud, you can trade sneakers that way these days. So we do have to be careful here, because the world is moving towards this electronic trading of all different kinds of assets for all different kinds of purposes. We're able to buy all different kinds of things online. Somebody once said to me, sorry for going on long here, but somebody once said to me, well, the big difference is blockchain settles instantaneously. And if you buy something from Amazon, you're not going to get it for 3 days. And I was
Delayed
like,
gratification in securities law. I haven't seen that one. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I said to them, I don't know what you're buying from Amazon, but I get most things next day and a lot of things same day. So you better upgrade your plan at Amazon.
Yeah. Do you get the sense that, where we are in market structure discussions, talks? I know there's two sort of bills in the different houses, right? You've got obviously the House's Clarity Act, and then you've got what's going on in the Senate, which is, depending on who you talk to, you've got kind of different stages of, you've got obviously your you've got your Senate Ag draft, which we don't know where that is exactly right now. And then you've got your Senate Banking draft, which, kind of, if you read my newsletter, you kind of know like the stages of where we are, but we may or may not see some drafts in the coming days or weeks. But all that to say, do you think what will be sort of the consensus on the token classification, once we get like a full market structure bill? Like, where do you think that will sit? Will that be the House's version with the Clarity Act, or will this be the kind of the new like ancillary asset angle we're seeing with the Senate draft? And what do you think is maybe is better for you, or in your view at Aave Labs as GC?
Yeah, so look, I think there's been a lot of hard work done in both the House and the Senate. There's been a lot of people in there doing advocacy work. The staffs and the senators and the members have all done a huge amount of work, and that is to be applauded. One of the things my dad used to tell me when I brought home bad grades was, it doesn't matter how hard you work, sometimes it's the results that matter the most, Lee. And so, we do have to understand what the results of these definitions are going to be. And ancillary asset has a bunch of challenges. Investment contract and sort of hinging everything off of an investment contract, especially when investment contract is still not particularly well defined. And we've been having fights about the definition of investment contract for a dozen or so years now. That to me is not going to be a nice path forward, because we're still just going to be having the same fights over and over again. Is there an investment contract? What is the ancillary asset? And all of this kind of stuff. So that's why we've kind of hinged on the protocol token idea. And we really hope that folks will adopt that definition and use that as the new type of asset that gets regulated. So we've put some proposals in front of folks in the Senate. We've written a whole bunch of comment letters to both the SEC and the CFTC on this. and we've urged them to take rulemaking action or exemptive relief. We really think that there's an avenue forward here that's workable and straightforward and gets us to a very robust market structure, leveraging the existing intermediaries who all want to trade this stuff, right? There's no reason stockbrokers shouldn't be able to add protocol tokens to what they offer to their clients, because it's just another asset that trades electronically and settles electronically. There's no reason that the futures commission merchants shouldn't be able to offer protocol tokens to their clients as another asset that trades electronically and settles electronically. So sure, there needs to be some thought about how it works because of the public blockchain angle and everything like that. I'm not saying that there's no work to be done, but what I am saying is we should leverage the existing regulatory infrastructure to really create a very robust marketplace in the United States. That's what everybody says that they want. I think that's the fastest path forward.
Yeah, Liam, I'm glad you brought up the comment letters that you guys have submitted, because I was looking the other day, the one you submitted to the SEC in April of this year. You obviously made a lot of arguments around digital, so DLTs, but more broadly, like token infrastructure. And you made a specific point that infrastructure providers on blockchain networks are not securities intermediaries,
Yes.
right? Which makes sense, because obviously if you're an infrastructure provider and the thing that you're providing is infrastructure, there's not a securities relationship there. But I want to get your thought on another really popular topic from the past week when we were up in New York, with tokenization and RWA and some of these types of things coming online, a lot more like traditional financial institutions. Many of them are securities intermediaries, and they're very comfortable, in that role. How do you see these kind of worlds colliding as like traditional finance tries to figure out how to deal with these instruments, and we put more and more wrappers around things and create this kind of complexity with these new sort of tokenized products?
Yeah, it's a great question, Gerald. And I go back to two principles. Principle number one is we got to understand the nature of the asset, right? So if it's a security not on a blockchain and you put it on a blockchain, you tokenize it or whatever, it's still a security. It hasn't changed what's the saying? The leopard hasn't changed its spots or whatever, right? So we do need to make sure that that critical point is driven home over and over and over again. I say it till I'm blue in the face, or at least blue in the shirt, but right. But the second point here is infrastructure, sort of morphs a little bit, but it's still infrastructure. And just because it's blockchain infrastructure as opposed to telecom infrastructure or hardware infrastructure like a cloud service or something like that, that doesn't change. In the same way that on the software side, nobody's running around saying that the browser makers need to be regulated intermediaries,
Right.
simply because I can access and trade securities through my browser, right? We focus on the folks who are actually providing the brokerage services. And we wrote a second comment letter to the SEC Crypto Task Force in May on this exact point, and we cited a bunch of the, broker no action letters that where the SEC has drawn very logical lines about what's infrastructure and what's intermediary. And we think that nature of the activity test, as we called it, makes a lot of sense. So it's nature of the asset, nature of the activity. And once we figure those two things out, we can really understand who needs to be regulated based on what it is that they're doing and the type of asset that's involved.
Mm-hmm. Lee, also did want to get your take on sort of the battle that's going on between the banks and industry over stablecoin yield. I wonder if you had any thoughts on that. I know it's it's not really Aave Labs' fight, but Gerald and I were talking about it in the beginning of the show. And we're like, we should get Lee's take on this.
It's everybody's fight.
It's
Yeah.
everybody's fight, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, look, Eleanor, it's clearly a really important question, and a bunch of the bank trade associations filed a comment letter this week that was very long and very detailed and very analytical. And, a bunch of the crypto trade associations did the same thing. So it's clear that the lines are being drawn here. Look, I understand why the banks want to make sure that the scope of the prohibition in the Genius Act is well understood. They see it as a potential competitive threat, and I understand that. I'm a pro-competition guy. I think the more competition we have, the better we get. One of the things I like about public blockchains is they are public infrastructure that people can build on and allow for greater competition. So I think that stuff is important. But I also am sensitive to the fact that banks play an important role in commerce and finance and the economy overall. And before we say, oh, we should just let all the banks fail and we'll deal with the consequences later, people way smarter than me should be spending some time thinking about what the right answer is. And I think from the people that I know at Treasury, there's a lot of smart people over there thinking about this stuff. So I think it's in good hands.
Yeah, I'm curious. I want to pull on that thread a little bit, just again with some of the acquisitions and the M&A we're seeing in the space, right? The answer here is okay, just like tokenize commercialized deposits, right? Like commercial deposits, and like fine, like now you're still a bank, but you're running on blockchain rails ostensibly. But the broader point is, we saw MasterCard make a bid for Zero Hash. We've seen Stripe and Bridge. I could go on, and I don't think that's slowing down anytime soon. Do you think that could be a place where the industry ends up, is that we are technology companies that are absorbed by compliance departments? Like maybe that's a little bit of like a bearish take, but like I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
Well, the way you phrased the question, Gerald, I think answers itself. No, we do not want to be taken over by compliance departments. Remember what we said at the beginning, I'm not wearing a suit again.
Yeah.
Those days are over.
Those days are over. No, but seriously, look, I do think there's going to continue to be M&A. I think the sort of TradFi folks recognize that blockchain rails are really good for a lot of purposes. And as I said before, the public infrastructure that blockchains now allow people to have and allow people to build on is something that companies like ours at Aave Labs that we're more adept at than the traditional financial services companies are. By the way, I'm not asking a bank to acquire us, but call me banks if you want. No, I'm just kidding. But right, so I think that's sort of the natural cycle of things. Is the innovative companies sometimes get acquired by the more legacy companies and help push the legacy companies into the future. So I think that is a possible result. I think it would be a good result in some circumstances. I just want to address the point about tokenized deposits, though, because one of the really interesting questions to me is, when does the tokenized deposit effectively become a stable coin? So
Right.
If I have a tokenized deposit and I can use it to so that you and I are splitting dinner and I can send you some of the money from my tokenized deposit, why is that not a stable coin? And by the way, same thing with money market funds. If you tokenize a money market fund and you can use those money market fund interests to make payments, maybe we're in a world where we need to be thinking about those things a little bit more and understanding more of the nuance there before we all rush in and say, no yields or only yields in certain circumstances, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody's looking to build their moats, and we want to make sure, in my view at least, that those moats work as pro-competitive moats as opposed to anti-competitive moats.
Well, yeah, Lee, we can't let you go without asking what are you watching for 2026? It's almost the end of the year. It's been a pretty tumultuous year for crypto in general, just in terms of the 180 in the narrative, I think, from Washington and Wall Street. But what are you watching next year? What's the narrative or the theme going to be, do you think?
So at the end of last year, I was at a dinner and somebody asked everybody to go around the table and make predictions. And one of my predictions was Bitcoin 250K. I guess that's still theoretically possible, but it's not looking that likely. So
not today.
take take my predictions with a grain of salt. What I'm really hopeful for is that we get some good market structure, either legislation or regulation going. That's what I'm going to be working very hard to accomplish in the U.S. I do think, we're a little bit behind other jurisdictions, not all jurisdictions, but a bunch of the other major jurisdictions. The UK and South Korea also running a little bit behind others, and I think they need to get moving as well. But to me, it's being able to have really robust markets for crypto in the United States. That's going to be the thing that I'm going to be the most focused on from a policy standpoint. I know that there are a lot of people focused on it from a business standpoint, and so hopefully the policy and the business stuff comes together in a way that really supercharges things for the U.S.
Great. Awesome. Well, Lee, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys. This was great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Thanks.
Yeah. See you soon.
Cool.
See you soon. All right. That does it for us on this Friday episode of Crypto in America Live. We will see you guys next week, next Friday, and have a great weekend. Bye, Gerald.
See you next week.
Enjoy Churchill Downs. Jealous.
Yeah.
Bye.